All right. And then back to share. Same question to the same three people. Can you still see the presentation? Thank you. It's really helpful. Hello, folks. My name is Seven Song. I'm talking to you from Ithaca, New York, my adopted hometown of the past 40 years, originally from Long Island, hence the accent. And today's subject obviously affects many, many, many people. I've done healthcare in a number of places around the world, mostly United States, a little bit in Central America, a little bit in some other places. And I would say the prevailing condition, the prevailing thing that kind of gets into the background of people from all over is anxiety, also depression. So this class is focused on anxiety, but honestly, the difference between anxiety and depression, while sometimes is clear, many times they're actually the symptoms are difficult to distinguish, and people easily vacillate between anxiety and depression and anxiety. But the focus of this class is anxiety. And so for the next few hours, I'm going to talk about, first, I'm going to go kind of an introduction, and then I'm going to go over specific plans. And hopefully some of them will be beneficial. Pretty much all of them are pretty safe. I'll go over specific safety issues with some of the specific plans. One thing I'm not going to do is become overtly political here. It doesn't really matter what politics you have. The world can be a scary place for everybody. Maybe not for those five people. Whoops, politics, there we go. All right, so here we go. So first, I just want to go over that herbal medicine is medicine. The word natural doesn't make it safe. The word natural is just what we apply to it. I really don't like the word natural. I pretty much never say I practice natural medicine. So again, just to reiterate the point, not only are herbs not necessarily safe for people, but people's reactions can really be variable to them, as we'll discuss with them. One of the major considerations with herbal medicine is its effects on pharmaceuticals that you may be currently taking. So this is a whole class in itself. I would just say be cautious if you're adding herbs when you're already taking pharmaceuticals, drugs with this. As I've mentioned while writing about this, is I am pro-medicine. I am not an anti-medical herbalist. Our system, many systems, not just the United States system, are pretty terrible and leave a lot of people without necessary medicines. But this is not the medicine's fault. This is a system fault. So, so to put it a little differently, I've worked with many, many people who are on pharmaceuticals and have given herbs, and in general, many of the outcomes have been okay. I would say be specifically cautious if you're taking what are called antipsychotic medications, things for like schizophrenia and mania, or bipolar, excuse me. Those conditions are very serious. And I would be very cautious with taking herbs with any benzodiazepines, like Xanax. In other words, I would be cautious with very strong medicines with people with strong emotional crises, emotional mental health disorders is really one way to say it. Generally, starting with very simple herbs in small amounts would be a good way to go forward. It's really big question none of us have an answer for because there's no studies, and we have not collaborated enough with input, with information. In other words, herbalists, we don't have a central dispensing of this is what we've seen here. Number three is none of this is meant to replace your medications. Many people on anti-anxiety herbs find them very helpful, some not helpful, some adverse. But the goal of this is not to help you get off your medications. If they're useful for you, then you have your own considerations to talk to with your prescriber. And number four might be the most important here. And that is people really do have wide range. The most common polarization or discrepancy, if for some people, like I'm going to use passion flower as an example. For some people, passion flower is a nice, very gentle herb, and for other people, it makes them sleepy. So it's not a terrible side effect, but it is an adverse effect. It's something you're not looking for. So while you're take herbs, new herbs into your body, be attentive to your body, be attentive to your mental and physical states, and see how the herb is playing out with you. Sometimes with some herbs like oats, it can be very difficult because it's kind of a food herb and very subtle. The herbs like valerian, it can be more obvious. But really, a lot of it is idiosyncratic. A lot of it is individualistic in your reaction. These are a list of the plants. I'm not going to name them all because we're going to cover them. There'll be 25 plants covered today, and this is them. And so I just want to cover what I mean by anxiety. It's a very, very broad range term. And so some of the symptoms for some people are spaciness and ungroundedness. So for some people, when they get anxious, they're very not present. That's how anxiety manifests within themselves. They're like, where am I? I'm having difficulty finding words. And the thing that's commonly called brain fog. These are all very common symptoms. All of these are very common symptoms. Another group of symptoms is people getting stuck in mental loops. And so it's often a worry. It's hardly ever a positive loop, like, oh, that ice cream was so delicious. And you just keep thinking how delicious that ice cream was. That's an uncommon loop. That would be a great one. More often, you're worried about the condition of yourself, the condition of other people, the condition of the world. And so these endless loops of mental thinking just make life difficult. It makes it very difficult to be present for other people because your mind is so active. So the one word I hear of is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing. I don't say that out loud very much. But that means taking any situation and blowing it up to the worst predictable situation, the worst situation you can imagine. And intrusive thoughts kind of means like beating yourself up, really. So, like, I could have done that better. I should have done that better. Keeping going, as I mentioned, often there's an inability to relax. So, with anxiety, your body is often in a tense state, mental state, often physical state. And that again makes it difficult to just be a present, and it makes it difficult to just enjoy life, right? So you hear a beautiful bird singing, but in your mind, you're just very concerned about whatever is concerning to you. The next one is really just a couple of things that often people ascribe to brain fog, and that's difficulty with focus, concentration, and memory. Also, the next one, people you become very jumpy. This is particularly true with things like PTSD. I'm not going to move into that specifically. But if many people have had horrible encounters in their lives, and these horrible encounters make you very aware of your circumstance. The word for this is often called hypervigilance. And so like somebody says hi, hello to you and you're not ready for it, you move into an anxious state, your body goes into a fight or flight. So that's what I mean by easily triggered here. So these symptoms just make life much less pleasant. Of course, there's degrees, right? So some people are always in an anxious state. Some people have occasional anxiety, and then it's the quality of the anxiety. Anxiety can definitely interrupt sleep. It can make it difficult to fall asleep. It can make it difficult to stay asleep. And it can make it difficult to have refreshed sleep. So the anxious thoughts continue through the night while you're sleeping, and then you wake up still feeling very unrelaxed. And that has a feed forward mechanism where then that anxiety moves through into the next day. Lastly, on this list of anxiety symptoms is that physical health is often affected. One of the very common ones is people's GI tracts just not working well. In other words, not digesting your food, constipation, diarrhea, or just a lot of stomach or gastric pain. Definitely shortness of breath. It can affect your respiratory system. Headaches, dizziness, sweating, and fatigue. In other words, these are all words to say that anxiety, while making it troublesome in one's mind, also makes it troublesome in one's body. And I'm imagining everybody here will have some of these some of the time. What I want to do is describe the various words that I use in this presentation. And first, the first couple of lines here are just the opposite of what I've just said. So all of the herbs that I'm mentioning, nervines, anxiolytics, and sedatives, I'll cover those in a moment. They can all help reduce some of the feelings of anxiousness. Many of them can help for long-term care of the nervous system. I often say nourishing the nervous system. It's not a specific term, but to me it makes sense. So your nervous system has been harmed. I mean, it's repeated attacks on our body throughout our lives, really. And if there's no way to release that, it just builds up. And so a lot of these herbs, while helping acute anxiousness while it's happening, um, many of them taken over the course of time, including in taking times when you're not anxious, can help the nervous system reestablish itself. And I have no idea how this works physiologically, but you see it. You see people taking these, and not only do they have reduced anxiousness, but there's reduced tension and many of the symptoms I've already mentioned. And so again, what I have here, improving sleep, physical symptoms, is just the opposite of what I've just covered. There's going to be a lot of overlap between these three categories that I'm about to get to with the next slide. And it could be helpful to initially try a small amount. This is where, like, if you know your own body and your sensitivities, this is very helpful. So I can't see most people here, but my guess, if I say who is very sensitive to herbs and drugs, I would get a sizable number of people raise their hands. So if you know that you tend to be sensitive to herbs, medications, you should start with a smaller amount. If you're the classic person that says, I have a hollow leg, or whatever definition you use to describe that, hollow leg means that you can eat a lot, so it doesn't really fit. But if you're the kind of person that actually has to take way more of anything to have an effect, you probably need to start with larger doses. It's not a perfect way of doing this, because you, for instance, be very sensitive to one herb, let's say skullcap, and not sensitive to passion flower. But in my experience, generally, people who are very sensitive to ingested substances tend to have a wide array of things, and people who are not sensitive often can try more things in larger doses. And then the last part of this is the goal is not to stop anxiousness. Anxiousness is an important aspect of being alive. Anxiousness makes us aware. Anxiousness makes us conscious of our situations. Anxiousness allows us to help people around us. Extreme anxiousness often freezes us. But the goal is like, how do I not be anxious? The goal is, how do I reduce the severity of my symptoms so that my life is more bearable? So I hope that makes sense. Next slide is going to go over. By the way, I'm not looking at any chats if you're writing them. I apologize for that, but I'm going to keep going. So these are the three distinctions, and I want to cover them a little bit. They overlap tremendously with each other, but the way I use these words, I hope is helpful. So generally, when I talk about a plant that's a nervine, I mean a plant that's toning to the nervous system and is rarely sedative. So the goal of nervines is often, I've been anxious a long time and I just want something to bring my nervous system homeostasis back online. So again, you could be sensitive to a nervine, but how I use the term generally means non-sedative and used as a long-term tonic. Weeks, months, and definitely for years. Just depends. Anxiety could be with us our whole lives. Yes, a relaxing tea. Not particularly tasty, but relaxing. The next term is anxiolytic. Anxiolytic just means anxious reducing. Lytic just means to reduce, just like the word lysis is used in chemistry, like to break apart things, chemicals. And anxio just means anxious. So anxiolytic just means breaks up anxiousness. I tend to use the word anxiolytic to help with more acute anxiety and generally non-sedating herbs. So there's a lot of overlap, and often it's really just the dosage. In other words, an herb that's an anxiolytic in small amounts, maybe taken in combination with other herbs, could be a nervine. So there's a lot of crossover. But when I'm saying it, I'm saying if you're just feeling really anxious, you're in a situation and you want to relax, I probably would not use the word nervine. I would use the word anxiolytic. And the dose is often the difference. And then the last of this triad is sedative. Sedative herbs can diminish mental capacity. It's that classic, don't take this while driving or operating heavy machinery, or trying to give a presentation online. So, but what's also true is that sedatives in small doses, often in combination, can also be nervines and anxiolytics. So part of it is just individuality. You might not have much of a, when you take skullcap, it might not be sedative to you, but somebody else it might be sedative. So you can take skullcap more as an anxiolytic and nervine, where somebody else is going to have to be cautious with using it, especially about needing to do something with fine dexterity. So to cover all these again, oh, so the word relaxing, I just wanted it in the title of the presentation. I just like the word relaxing. Everything else to be stress inducing. I wanted the word relaxing in there. So that has, I have no definition for that. So nervines or gentle tonics, generally non-sedative. Anxiolytics might be a little bit stronger, but are used for more acute anxiety when you don't want a sedating effect. And sedatives are those that might decrease a little bit. They can make you much more relaxed physically and mentally, but may not be the best when you're in situations where you have to be more on top of your game. And again, all of these things are largely have to do with dosages, preparations, though a number of factors play into that. So, and also the last, just to say again, with sedatives, they're commonly used for sleep. So you might use a nervine or anxiolytic throughout the day to help you sleep at night, but the sedative herbs are used like I just can't sleep, my mind's on fire. How do I get sleepy? And those are more your sedatives. These are some definitions. I'm going to go over them quick. I'm recording this. Hopefully it comes out. These are just in alphabetical order. So a decoction is a tea that's made by boiling the plant in water, like a soup. A couple of these terms are botanical terms. I'm a botanist, and I feel very fuss budgety, to use a term from Lucy, about botany terms. So a flower is an individual reproductive structure of a plant. And I'm going to skip to the next one. I'm going to skip. And then an inflorescence is a group of flowers. So for instance, if you gather a dandelion, right, not in this slideshow, but if you gather a dandelion, that's a group of flowers. That's an inflorescence. If you gather one rose flower, that is a flower. You don't really have to know the distinction, but it's going to be for each plant, whether it's a flower or a group of flowers. For instance, yarrow, many, many groups of flowers. Again, roses, often you can pick because they're very big flowers, a single flower. The fruit, when I mention the fruit of a plant, the fruit is the ripened ovary of a plant. It doesn't matter what it looks like or what it tastes like. It just means that it contains the seeds of the plant. So in this example, a zucchini, a rosehip, and a dandelion seed, they're all examples of fruits of the plant because they're structures that contain the seed. I don't want to go into the specifics. I just want you to realize the word fruit does not mean a tasty dessert plant. It's the ripened ovary of a plant or ripening ovary of a plant. And to go with that, the word infructescence on this list that's very poorly numbered, if you go to infructescence, that means a group of fruits. So if you're gathering something and there's a whole bunch of fruits combined, it's called honey in this as well. The next is the word garble. Garble, I think herbalists are just trying to hold on to this word and not let it slide away into obscurity. But the garble means to kind of remove the parts of the plant that you want and get rid of the rest. For instance, if you had feverfew or another plant and you're taking off the flowers and the leaves, you're garbling the plant. And sometimes when you're reducing it to use for a tea, that's called garbling. Yeah, and you can use this tonight in dinner discussion with somebody. See how often you can bring in the word garble. Seems like Thanksgiving would be an easier time. An infusion is a tea where the hot water is poured on top of the plant. So as a decoction is when you cook the plant in the water. An infusion is when you pour the boiling water on top of the plant. It's really what most people call tea, frankly. The next is a rhizome. So again, this is like a botanical point for me. There are many structures underneath the ground of plants. You have tubers, rhizomes, uh, terms. So I tend to use them differently. So I just wanted to point out that two medicinal parts, underground structures of plants, are rhizomes and roots, and they're different parts of plants. So the one that you're familiar with is a root. So roots anchor the plant in the soil and pull up the nutrients. Rhizomes are places in the plant that go horizontal to the soil line and store nutrients. So if like you're digging up a wild yam, something like that, and there's a whole part that goes sideways along the soil line, that's a rhizome. The part from the wild yam, or let's say calamus, the parts that go down into the soil, those are roots. You don't really have to know these very much. I just wanted to cover them because I'll be using them in the presentation. Next, these are just four of the very common kinds of medicines or preparations that I use. So we have tinctures, glycerites, teas, powders, and capsules. These are going to be the main ones for this class. So a tincture is a plant based in alcohol. And the kind of alcohol is called ethanol. Drinking alcohol is ethanol alcohol. There's three kinds of alcohol. Ethanol is the one that you're going to buy if you're using it as a drink. The most important thing to know, though, when you're giving a tincture is that somebody who avoids alcohol, right? So many people are sober, and you should not. This is a whole discussion that I'm getting into depth with. I'm going to sum it up. Before you give anybody a tincture, hold the bottle up and says, this has alcohol in it. Is that acceptable for you? With everybody, unless they're children, as soon as they're adults, you say, this has alcohol. Is that okay? They might be pregnant avoiding alcohol. There might be spiritual reasons to avoid alcohol, or they could be sober and avoid alcohol. Just let everybody know, because the word tincture does not imply alcohol for people. Let's not start people drinking who are avoiding drinking. Next is glycerites. These are plants based in vegetable glycerin. One thing that people don't know about vegetable glycerin is that it doesn't raise blood sugar despite being very sweet. It does a very small fraction, but it has to be processed. It's a whole part of body physiology. So vegetable glycerin is not the best at extracting plant material, but it's an excellent preservative. And of course, it's way friendlier than very flavor friendly for many people. Tea is a water-based plant preparation. Water is the most universal solvent. Water pulls stuff out of plants better than anything else. I just want to point out that when you make a tincture, it's usually alcohol plus water, right? So there is water in most tinctures, which helps pull the plant material out. And the last is a powder or a capsule. So a capsule is just a powder put into a capsule. And there's two advantages of powders and capsules. One of them is that they look the most like pharmaceuticals. So when you're working with people who are wary of, some liquid drops that they're not used to taking, capsules look like drugs, basically. And then the other part of them, there's a few things. They're actually, as far as nutritional support, powders are the best. So in this class, it's not so important. This is not a class about getting nutrition from plant. This is a class about reducing anxiety. But if you're if you're thinking somebody's deficient and you want to give them something, you want to get some vitamins in there, powders are the best because it's the whole plant, just powdered form. And also, frankly, they're pretty easy to take. So, sorry to go over all these, but we'll get into plants very soon. So we have tinctures and alcohol, we have vegetable glycerin, we have tea, and we have powders and capsules. There's going to be other ones showing up, but these are the main preparations that are going to be used for the plants that I cover today. I just want to point out, I really thought about putting this on here in different ways. With each plant, I try to give it dosage, but it is so hard, and I want to go over why it's so hard to give dosages for the individual plants. And I just want to go over these 7 reasons. Number 1, the individual reaction to the plant or to the formula. Number 2, what is the plant based in? Is it a tincture, a glyceride, or a tea? All of those might extract different ingredients and have different potencies. Number 3 is the strength of the preparation. You can make a tincture, for instance, at 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Those will have different dosages when you give the plant. They'll have different potencies. Number 4, a little redundant, but it's the potency of the individual herb. When you gather plants or make your own medicines, often you can see, oh, look, this yarrow seems old and doesn't have much aromatics to it anymore. Probably not that good. Or you might say, wow, this yarrow has maintained its color and has maintained its potency and aroma. Well, it's not its potency, but its aroma. So in other words, the quality of the plant that you're using will also affect the dosage. Will it be a strong or a weaker thing, depending on are the constituents still intact within the next? If it's used by itself or in formula, it's going to make a very big difference. And then what's the other plants in the formula? Are you using very sedative plants like skullcap and valerian, or very gentle plants like wood, betony, and wild oats? And then the last, are you using it as a tonic or for acute symptoms? Are you just doing long-term nerve repair, or is your goal to help reduce anxiety at the moment? This is all an excuse to just say that I am going to give dosages, but it's really hard to know specific dosages for these and probably other reasons. So please be considerate to yourself and to those you offer herbs to about how it might affect them. This is just the order of each of the plants. This is more for me as I'm making notes. And believe it or not, the plants. Here we go. Take a moment, raise a cup of tea. So I hope this is working out for you so far. I'm glad I got through all that information. I'm always trying to, what am I trying to do? I worry about the oversimplification of herbal medicine. I worry about the oversimplification of health. Health is a very tricky, don't worry, this won't be more than a half hour. No, health is a very tricky thing, right? And so if it's simple, like you have a minor cold, you just have lots of options, or you have just a little bit of anxiety. But if you have anxiety that affects you on a day-to-day basis and makes it difficult for you to do anything, those are very different situations. So I want herbal medicine to be taken seriously, and also maybe with a little bit of fun. Our first plant is anemone, and then you'll be able to see the species if I have it of that plant. So anemone is also known as pulsatilla or pulsatilla. Um, its scientific name goes back and forth between anemone and pulsatilla. I just want to say botanically, it's not. Yeah, the name is still in flux in official botanical circles. It's also known as pasque flower and windflower. Pasque flower, which is Easter, right? And Easter is coming up. Well, Easter is tomorrow. So not here in the country, but it's an early flowering plant. So in many places in the world, uh, anemone will start to flower in mid-April, hence pasque flower. I'm not really sure why windflower is called that, but anemone means wind. So the parts used, the roots and the top and the above ground sections are both used of the plant. The below ground sections are either roots or tubers, depending on the species. They may be more potent, but it's better for the plant community to gather the tops. I have to say, though, I've mostly just used underground structures where there's only one place I gather this plant. I'm not going to go into wildcrafting with all of them, but for this plant, I just want to say that there's one place that I gather it that's extremely remote, and there's tens of thousands of plants. So I feel comfortable gathering the underground structures. Most places in the world, I would just gather the tops. This is a plant where it has to be fresh to make medicine. Many plants, most plants maybe, dried, quality dried plants work fine. But I think anemone, you have to gather it and prepare it fresh. And I've only ever used a tincture, which is a problem because I can't give it to people who can't take tinctures. But at that point, this is what's happening. So anemone is the most specific of all the plants I'm going to cover today. And that is, it's probably the plant that's best used for panic attacks. We have two words closely allied, panic attack and anxiety attack. Anxiety attack just means anxiety to an elevated range, but a panic attack means anxiety elevated to a point where basically you can't function anymore. You feel incapacitated. You can't make the next step. You're worried that you might die. So these are all panic attacks, and they're common. Many of you here will have panic attacks occasionally or commonly. Anemone, unfortunately, does not seem to really be a tonic for this, but for acute, it often works. I would have to say, this is putting myself on the line here, but out of all the plants that I've used for anything acute, anemone has been one of the most successful, meaning that when I'm around people having panic attacks, if I give them some, it often reduces it to either a less problematic level or helps it more thoroughly than that. In other words, they're having less of a panic attack. Um, the dosage is about 10 drops, uh, and then you wait a little bit. So here's what it looks like. You're working, you have a panic attack, or somebody you're working with has a panic attack. Give them 10 drops. I usually just give it directly. And then wait about 2 minutes or so, 2 to 3 minutes. Generally, that amount of time, you'll start to see a reduction of symptoms. In other words, they'll be less panicky, probably still agitated, but less of that fight or flight, less of that, less of that panic. So then you ask the person, has that helped? And if they say yes, then give another five. You give like 5 to 10 drops, somewhere in between. 5 drops for a more sensitive person, 10 drops for maybe somebody a little less sensitive. It's hard to know. We'll come to safety in a minute. So I play around with it, the dosage, between 5 to 10 drops as needed. So initially I give it. The person says either three things. Has it helped you? It hasn't helped at all. It's helped a little bit, or uncommonly, but possible, it made me feel worse. If it makes them feel worse, stop it. It's the wrong plan for them. If it hasn't helped or has helped a little bit, wait a few minutes and repeat the dosage and keep repeating that dosage until either they're in a better state of mind or it's not helping anymore. So this is one of the only plants that I do this with on a regular basis. So in other words, I've given it 2 to 3 times and I'll ask, has it helped? They go, I feel a little better. Let me try one more dose. One more dose. There's no change. I'll just stop it because it's not helping at all. So anemone is used for panic attacks. I keep putting it into anxiety formulas, but I've never really seen it have a long-term effect. There are safety concerns about anemone. There's some constituents, as in there are many plants in the same family, the Ranunculaceae. But in the dosages given, I haven't seen any problems. Processing it, though, it could be a little problematic. So I've written much more about processing it elsewhere. But generally, giving it to people in the doses we give seems very safe. I mostly use the Western species, and it is the state flower of South Dakota. So you go, South Dakota. All right, next plant. So again, I'm just going to keep moving through these. This is the very lovely blue vervain, the Verbena hastata. It's such a gorgeous plant. The parts used are the whole above ground plant. If I have a lot of it, I just use these essence. In other words, not the individual flowers, but the whole flower part, which I don't think I. So use the leaves and flowers, but the stem has a minor amount. Here's the problem. Blue vervain is a native plant, and I don't want people gathering really large amounts of it. I'm hoping people don't gather large amounts of it and taking it out of wetlands. So to get more plant matter, gather the whole plant and cut it up, but the leaves and the flower tops, the inflorescences, have the most medicinal action. You can make a tincture with it or an infusion. Those are the two. It is pretty bitter, as with many of these plants. And I would put it squarely as a Nervine anxiolytic, as opposed to a sedative. And I don't know. So I would say that blue vervain is one of the better herbs that I use regularly that helps with intrusive thoughts, racing mind, inability to relax because of anxiousness. It's really for like Another way of saying this, I'll probably say it again a few times, is hot-headedness. Like there's so much going in your mind, and it's just the thoughts are going around and around, and it's in a loop. So blue vervain can help a little bit for the moment, but it does work better as a Nervine tonic. So take it as needed for anxiousness, but keep taking it for days or weeks to kind of reduce the body's mechanism for going there in the first place. Um, so it's usually used in formula. You can see the dosages here. Again, this will be put online. Um, it's very safe, but it is quite bitter. So I would say 1/2 to 1 dropper full by itself. I rarely use blue vervain by itself, but I often use it in formula with other herbs that we'll cover today. Uh, it's considered safe, as I mentioned, and it's just gorgeous. Please do not overharvest this plant. It's not that hard to grow, um, but it needs a wetland, and the soil has. All right, look at that. That's the orange is California poppy. I freaking love seeing these vistas when I'm in the Southwest, like Arizona or California, right around now. It probably is past. It's just incredible. I remember the first time I was driving in Arizona, 20 years ago, and I saw the orange hills in the distance, and I just thought, oh, it must be some kind of very colorful mineral in there. And then getting there and realizing it's just thousands and thousands of California poppy plants. This is right outside of Los Angeles, this photo. Lake Elsmere, I think. California poppy, the whole plant, roots, leaves, and flowers. So I like to gather the plant when actually it's even better, roots, leaves, flowers, and fruits. Like the plant is ready to go to seed. One of the few plants that I do this for, but I think the whole plant is the medicinal part. It makes a good tincture and it makes a good infusion. But California poppy, just after a couple of months or a year or two, it just loses its medicinal oomph. So, um, so I rarely dry it. It's another Nervine anxiolytic, and I find it has very more than some of the other plants I mentioned, very individual reactions to the plant. So for some people, they find it mildly relaxing, and other people will have a gentle sedative effect. So that's if you have a gentle sedative effect, it usually does not render people incapable of performing anything. But it can be very relaxing. But other people, it's much more minor than that. You can barely feel it in your body. And with so many of these nervines, taking on a regular basis is very helpful. And once again, the dosage, it depends on whether it's in preparation and formula, how much you're taking, your sensitivity. I don't know if I'm gonna only go over some of the dosages of specific plants. I think for something like this, it's really very variable. And again, you can always bring this screen back up. California poppy is very safe and it contains no opium whatsoever. It is related to the opium poppy, Papaver somniferum, but it has none of it. In other words, if you get drug tested, it won't show up. There are zero poppies. If you get drug tested and it comes out positive, poppy seeds on a bagel might do it because those are from the opium poppy, but this plant won't. And as I mentioned, it is just when it grows in profusion, it's mind-blowing, the beauty. So California poppy, a gentle, relaxing herb for some people, even mildly sedative, depending on dosage. Get good quality preparations of it. I've never made a glycerite, but probably you can do it if you played around with it as well. The next herb is cannabis. And um, and actually the family Baceae. So I'm just going to point it out. I have Cannabidaceae up there as a botanist. That's embarrassing. The family is Cannabaceae. So cannabis, of course, is the marijuana plant and have so many names to it. I don't rarely use the plant. So I put it in here because it's important for many people, but I'm not somebody who uses it very much for patients. So there are many names for it. And often the names are given depending on the amount of constituents, whether it's CBG or CBD, or those various things. The parts used are the female buds. Pistillate is the female part. The female buds. There's many, 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 many preparations for this plant. Um, and it covers all the categories depending on everything, depending on individual sensitivity. And of course, something we come into that hasn't been mentioned yet is the strain matter. So cannabis is extensively cultivated, and those extensive cultivations often change the amounts of different ingredient chemical composition of buds. And so some of them might have a mild euphoria, and some others might put you to sleep immediately. And of course, people get paranoid with it. So I don't want to spend too much time with cannabis because it could be a lot of time can be spent, and there are people who are way more experienced than me. Um, in the free clinic, I get preparations that have different qualities of THC or CBD or CBG. But I know the manufacturers, and then I just trust them when I give it out to people. It's really usually an oil form of it that people take internally. So there's a lot of variability in here. It's all over the place because there are so many different strains of it. There's so many different preparations from it. Um, so I'm afraid I'm going to leave off here and just say I would explore cannabis other places with people who are more experienced than I with this plant. The next is catnip. I'm back into my comfort zone. Uh, so catnip, I mean, what plant isn't lovely, right? So, so catnip, it's the leaves and inflorescence. It is a heck of a plant to garble. So even if you grow like a big catnip plant, generally by the time you strip all the leaves and flowers off, you just get like a handful. So it's really easy to grow. So I'm just telling you that it takes a while to destem it. Uh, Tincture, glyceride, and infusion are all used. It does have an interesting flavor. I really like the glycerite though of this plant. Pretty much all the aromatic plants make good glycerites. And I would say it's another non-sedative Nervine anxiolytic. Catnip's specialty is helping when anxiety is felt in your gut. So those who butterflies in your stomach, or really you get anxious and you can't, your appetite goes down, or it just hurts to eat, or you get anxious and you just get stomach aches. This is where catnip really shines in all of its forms. It can be taken for a long term to help reduce this over time, but can definitely be taken as needed uh, in any of those forms, tinctures or glycerites or teas, for stomach aches associated with anxiety. I mean, it could just be taken for stomach aches, but we're talking about anxiety, and here's where catnip really does its great work. It combines great with other herbs. We'll cover the chamomile next, but it's just a nice, gentle nervine for people who are maybe sensitive to plants, sensitive, and you want to give something that like doesn't make them sedated and just helps them function well. And then you start using catnip with other gentle plants like wood betony or tulsi or rose. It really has a nice gentle effect on people. And it can be taken as needed, especially if the stomach hurts and you're anxious, or it could be taken as nervine over a long period of time. It's considered very safe. And as we all know, it has a paradoxical effect on cats. It kind of initially agitates them and then relaxes them. Like my former kitty would just like chomp, 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 and then fall asleep. He actually liked cat mint, a slightly different plant than catnip better. I have both in my garden. And just so in case you don't know this, valerian root does the same thing to cats. My kitty again, valerian root was really his choice to chew on and to get like kind of agitated and fall asleep. Um, Back to catnip, it's really easy to grow in many places. And I really suggest it. If you haven't used catnip, it's a plant that I think is underappreciated for its gentle, relaxing, especially effects on its GI tract. Next is chamomile, the plant that no matter how much you grow, you may get a teapot or two worth of it. It's also called German chamomile, and also has the other botanical name of Matricaria recutita. So it's Matricaria chamomilla in some books, Matricaria recutita in others. They're the same plant. It's very different than the plant called Roman chamomile, which is a different genus. The parts used are the inflorescence, the flowering tops. You can have leaves in there for sure. There's some medicinal quality. Again, another tincture, glycerite, or infusion. And again, chamomile glycerite, superb, lovely stuff. And it's a nervine anxiolytic. So chamomile is very relaxing, but not overly relaxing, and can be taken over the course of time. I use a lot of chamomile. Initially, I didn't use so much, I think, because it's so popular. I have this problem with popularity. But then once I started using it regularly, I've just really found it to be so beneficial. I'm just going to skip to the safety and then come back to the rest. The problem is some people definitely are allergic to chamomile and will start to have allergy symptoms, stuffy nose, mucus. This happens. It's rarely problematic, meaning non-anaphylactic, but then those persons just avoid chamomile. To spend one more minute on this, often the books will say if you're allergic to chamomile, you're allergic to echinacea and other plants in the Asteraceae. That is poppycock. There's 25,000 plants in the Asteraceae. If you're allergic to chamomile, you might be allergic to other plants in that family, the Asteraceae or Compositae, but often I haven't seen that. So that's just to say, if you've been told if you're allergic to chamomile, avoid all these other plants, look into it more. So chamomile has anti-inflammatory properties as well. And inflammation often brings about pain, and pain often brings about anxiety, right? Or depression. So chamomile has a number of attributes to it to really help with anxiety. Go so first, it's anti-inflammatory internally and externally, and especially or partly for the gut. So if you just have really irritated gut, similar to catnip, chamomile is good. And to put this into the terms of anxiety, if anxiety uh, collaborates, comes at the same time um, as stomach pain or just upset stomach, diarrhea, IBS, then chamomile is one of the herbs to go to. It's very similar to catnip in this respect. Both catnip and chamomile really help with anxiety felt in the gut and really help when you have other digestive issues, diarrhea, constipation associated with anxiety. Um, and it could just be taken daily and jumping down. It has really good, it has excellent patient compliance because it's widely known. And of almost every plant I'm going to discuss today, chamomile is probably known the best by a lot. It's just like a worldwide or many places in the world well-loved plant. So that means when you say I'm going to give you chamomile, many people it triggers a positive response because there's familiarity to it, right? When you're giving herbs to people, many of them, you're giving wood betony, I don't know, skullcap, none of those things mean anything. And then you say chamomile, and you can actually see the relief in many people because there's recognition and familiarity. While some people say it breeds contempt, it also helps reduce anxiety. It could be used alone or in combination, and really the dosage is all over the place depending on how you're going to use it and what preparation and what other herbs. And it's very safe except for people who are allergic. Really a great herb. All of these are great herbs. Chamomile is just a well-known great herb. Next, we have some years ago, I flew out to visit a friend in Los Angeles, and then we drove to southern Baja, California, because I've always wanted to see this plant in the wild. This plant is in Baja, California, and this photo is taken in the wild, way south. And yes, it smells even better live as it does dried. It's a lovely plant. And if you look, you can see it's in the same family as passion flower, though it's recently been moved from one family to the Passifloraceae. So the parts of Damiana are the leaves and the flowers, really mostly the leaves. It makes a good tincture, glycerite, and infusion. Um, The glyceride is delicious, like so many other glycerites. But here's the trick. Damiana is one of those plants where if you infuse for too long, it goes from tasty to bitter and kind of unpleasant. So just infuse it, meaning pouring boiling water on it for a few minutes, drink it. Medicinal benefits without the bitterness and other aspects that happen when it's oversteeped. And here you can see I talk about it as a useful after-work beverage. I find Damiana really good after you've done something that's tensed you up, whatever kind of work you do, and then you come home and you want to be alert and available and doing whatever you need to do, but you need something to bring the mind down a little bit. Damiana is just really good for that. So I really like Damiana as just kind of a bring down after a tense time where you still have to be very present. But also it's just really useful as a day-to-day Nervine or anxiolytic. I would say it's a little bit stronger. Like if chamomile is a 4, then Damiana is a 6, something like that. It's rarely sedative, but it has a little bit more relaxing properties to it. So as I've mentioned here, if you just can't sit still and relax, and again, you need to, I suggest cup Damiana or the glycerite, but also it could be taken daily as an overall Nervine. So, yeah, I go through stages. These days I give it a little less, and other times I give it very regularly. I rarely see negative effects from it. As I've mentioned here in the safety factor, number 6, it's generally well tolerated, and it's rare to have adverse or negative effects. So, a nice, gentle, well, actually, a little more than gentle, a good relaxing plant that can be taken as needed after a stressful period to bring you down and still be present, or taken in smaller amounts regularly to just help with day-to-day anxiety. Damiana is often called an aphrodisiac. So the word aphrodisiac often means libido enhancer. Um, that's not what Damiana does. Damiana is an aphrodisiac if getting in the mood is difficult because you're anxious. That's where I would place it. So if you want to be intimate with somebody, but you're stuck in your head, and I mean physically intimate here, it could be difficult to be intimate, right? I mean, it's difficult to enjoy somebody else and being present when your head is racing. So Damiana, I would say, is an aphrodisiac only in the sense of it's relaxing and helps people be more present to it. But it's not to increase blood going to certain areas of the body, if that's what aphrodisiac means to other people. All right, keep going. Just a few more to go. We have many more to go. Next one is hawthorn with these lovely flowers. By the way, these lovely flowers smell like kind of rotten meat. Hawthorn, not all of them, but all the ones around where I live in the Northeast, hawthorn flowers attract what are called carrion insects, insects that are drawn to dead critters to nibble on. So, as opposed to many, many flowers that are very sweet and attract bees, these attract beetles and flies. So smell them. It's not terrible. There are many species of Crataegus, and they tend to be used interchangeably. I have no idea. One day I'll take a class on learning my hawthorns, but they hybridize, and yeah, and there's a lot of species. The part used for this is the flower. I know that many people use hawthorn fruit, but for relaxing, I use the flower. So once again, you have different ways to use it: tincture, glycerite, and infusion. And I would say here we are again into another nervine anxiolytic. One of the advantages of hawthorn is its strong antioxidant qualities, its strong free radical scavenging qualities. Those words are interchangeable. Make it really good for people who have anxious and also trying to give themselves a cardiovascular tonic. So this is not going to, I mean, if you have had heart damage, heart attacks, or uh, other kinds of heart failure, you might certainly need medication. But hawthorn in general can help as a cardioprotective herb. In other words, it seems to scavenge some of the damage done to the heart And so you have this on top of its relaxing effect. So I would say that hawthorn is best used really as a nervine on a day-to-day use that's non-sedating, that you just want to have something that brings the pulse of your nervous energy down over the course of time and kind of soothes it out without having any dramatic effect. It's pretty nice tasting, the flowers. Um, and again, I don't really ever give hawthorn because somebody's very anxious, like Damiana, and I'm trying to soothe them. I see somebody, they might have cardiovascular problems or not. I mean, as they say, 50% of people die of heart disease in the US and other countries. So I'm sure this would pretty much benefit everybody, the flowers as medicine on a regular basis, but also just as a soothing, relaxing agent. And then it could be used with other herbs. Again, the dosage, I'm just going to say that it really just depends on many factors. It's considered very safe. It is very safe. And I've already mentioned that it lures flies and other carrion insects. So if you haven't used hawthorn flowers yet, here's a nice new one to try and put in your daily tonic. The next is hops. And finally, I spelled Cannabaceae correctly. How embarrassing. So hops is closely related to cannabis, marijuana. It's in the same family. It has male and female plants. The female plant makes a bud, and that bud has a resin that's psychoactive. In other words, a lot of similarity to its close cousin, cannabis. I'm going to say that all again. So basically, you know, hops is related. There's a resin that comes from the female bud, and that affects the nervous system. So the word for the female bud is called a strobile. There's lots of specific terms for the different kinds of fruits. This would be the fruit of the hops plant. You can make a tincture, a glycerite, or an infusion. And I put in my own what I think it tastes like. I really dislike the flavor of hops. You may like it. It's very different when beers or anything have hops in them. I just find the tea of hops very strong tasting and an ugh flavor. And for the first plant, really, we're moving from nervines to now anxiolytic sedatives. So almost every plant I've covered so far really can be used on a day-to-day basis in higher dosages to have a relaxing effect. Now we're going to have to start thinking this can have a more sedative effect and can make it more difficult for somebody to do their daily activities because it will sedate them. So, but as I mentioned previously, it's really about how much you take it and what else you take it with. Like if you took a tincture and you had like tulsi and rose and oats and wood betony and a tiny bit of hops, it's be sedative. You can take it unless you take a lot of it. So, but if you're using hops with other sedative plants like valerian or kava, we'll come to those, then it will have a strong sedative effect. So, why am I saying all this? Because I'm gregarious. And also to say that hops can be used like if somebody has very strong anxiety, like the kind of person that has maybe social anxiety, work anxiety, and so maybe wakes up anxious and just has a really like the anxiety is just at a constant threshold that makes being present or really makes engaging with people just means anxious all the time in a very unpleasant way. Hops, depending on the dosage, can be used daily as a nervine by itself or with other herbs, and it's stronger, right? So if the person's not sensitive to it, so you start off with maybe, I don't know, by itself, 5 drops, and then that doesn't work. So it'd be like 5 drops 3 times a day. And then that doesn't do anything. So then you go to 10 drops 3 or 4 times a day. So you're trying to find that person's individual sensitivity to the hops and then use it on a daily basis. Um, so hops is really very useful. It's kind of strong tasting. If people have a hard time with the flavor though, the glycerin works great and is less bitter, strong tasting than the tincture or the tea. It's generally considered safe in the amounts that you drink. There are some rat studies showing that it can bind to estrogen receptors. I'm still on hops, cannabis too on this. Anyway, more about hops. Um, it's unclear if hops binds to estrogen receptors on humans. You can look up the research, but I have to say, as far as the amounts given herbally, I have no idea. I've never seen a negative effect. I haven't seen anybody with changes in breast growth or any other thing where you might see estrogen or changes in menses, fluctuations associated with hops. It might happen, but it seems uncommon. But that's its one warning with the hops is that and the rat studies are pretty good. I just want to say that they show with rats hops can be problematic. So as I mentioned, it's related to it to cannabis, but it's definitely not cannabis, right? There are many strains of hops, um, but there's I don't know if I've ever seen any, make people stoned or whatever word one might use for people ingesting, large amounts of cannabis. Generally more gentle than that. So we've reached an herb that's really helpful for a more aggravated anxiety, and also you could just take a lot of it as needed. So you have to do something, but you don't have to be very present. You could just take, 2 to 3 dropperfuls, and it'll have a much more sedative effect. And as with all sedative herbs, hops is really excellent for sleep. So if anxiety keeps you awake, uh, try taking hops before going to sleep, or if waking up during the night. On our next strong herb, this is the roots and root crowns of kava kava, fresh plant. So it's called kava awa or kava kava. Um, Basically, all the underground structures are used for medicine. So root crowns, rhizomes, roots, rootlets. There's a number of preparations to make with kava: tincture, glycerite, decoction, meaning pouring, putting in boiling water and simmering it, powder and capsule. So this is a plant that works very well. It's fairly stable. So if you make powders and capsules of kava, it will last a long time. Many plants degrade quicker. Like if you took hawthorn flowers, to go back a few, if you took hawthorn flowers and powdered them, uh, because of the thinness of tissue and the aromatics, the hawthorn flower wouldn't last very long as a capsule, whereas something like kava is stable as a capsule. And we have another anxiolytic sedative. Kava also has different types due to the cultivation of it. So you might try some kava and find it very strong, and try the same amount of another kava and have very different effects because it's cultivated and different strains are grown, just like cannabis. Not the same plant, not related, but the same idea. So kava is a little bit strong depending on the amount you're taking. I would first, kava can definitely help relax the mind. It's one of the better herbs, maybe along with hops, when you're anxious at the moment. And it doesn't really matter if you have to be very present or do something with a lot of dexterity. You just want to come on down. So, like I mentioned with Damiana, like Damiana, you come home from work and you still have to do stuff, but you want to relax a little. Damiana is great. Kava, you come home from work and all you want to do is eat frozen pizza and watch The Pit, which makes me quite anxious. um, then kava is a better choice. So it's stronger in what I'm trying to say here compared to Damiana. Also, I would say that kava is one of the better herbs for social anxiety, depending on the dosage, because it has that relaxing quality that alcohol also has. So, if you have to go someplace and you want to loosen up, maybe dance a little bit, or you just like having a hard time interacting because you're really tight, figure out your dosage of kava and use it as that kind of social lubricant for that. So the dosage is, start small, build up, whatever form. It's a stronger herb. Um, but I would say it's it's one of the ones, it's maybe it just, what's the word for it? Here's the word for it. It's a bit of a disinhibitor. The most common substance that's described as disinhibiting is alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, alcohol and kava have different reactions, but they share disinhibition. So disinhibition means that you're less inhibited. So when somebody drinks alcohol and starts talking a lot, the thing that's happened is parts of their brain have shut off, And so you're thinking less about car repairs. You're thinking less about the troubles in the world. And so you're more present in a kind of weird way. I would say kava has that property too of disinhibition. So, of course, it's dose dependent. If you take too much of it, it might make you nauseous. It might make you fall asleep. That would be a lot of it. And also the dosage would matter a lot. The preparation, excuse me, would also matter a lot. But small amounts of it can just help people relax and be present. They're probably not as present as they would be without it, but less anxious. I would say if you're drinking medium to large amounts, avoid driving. It's a skeletal muscle relaxant. Also, alcohol is. So your reaction time could be less. All of this is very dose dependent. I would avoid it with any kind of benzodiazepines. So Xanax, for instance, or an old school one would be Valium. Um, I haven't seen this, but my guess is that they can have add-on effects. They seem to have similar actions. So if somebody's taking those, I avoid kava, even if they want to relax more. And I haven't seen anything about it, but because of the strength of kava, this is one of the strongest herbs I'm covering on this whole presentation. I would just avoid it in pregnancy. I've never seen anything specific, but it has enough of a body reaction where that's saying what I've said, I would just avoid, yeah, in pregnancy. So kava is a really helpful herb. It can be helpful to just relax a little bit. If you just try to enjoy yourself, come home from work, you want to watch a movie, and you're just finding yourself stuck in your head, and you don't really have to do much for the rest of the night. And again, dose is everything. If you take like a half a dropper full, it's just going to have a very minor effect. You take 2 dropper fulls, it'll probably have a stronger effect as far as relaxation. So it's another herb to give it a try. It's strong flavored, but glycerite will be a little bit less strong flavored and also less strong in action. And it does well. Though whenever you do a capsule or a powder, you have to remember that it'll take longer for action because you're going to swallow it and then it has to open up in your stomach. And when it's just going to take longer to move and be absorbed. Next herb is lavender. Back to the more gentle herbs. It's kind of strong flavored. This is at the Cornell Botanic Garden. If you live around Ithaca and you haven't visited the Cornell Botanic Garden, I would highly suggest it. It's just we have an herbal botanical garden here in Ithaca. Really nice. So lavender, it's the inflorescence, the flowers, and the leaves that are used for medicine. Tincture, glycerite, and infusion. You don't want to decoct lavender. You want to, pour boiling water on it if you're going to drink it. And also the essential oil, which I'll cover a little bit. Lavender is also another Nervine anxiolytic. Like a couple of other herbs like chamomile and catnip, it has a relaxing effect on the digestive tract. But I would say overall, lavender has a very soothing effect on people. So specifically, if GI is involved, GI is gastrointestinal or digestive, lavender is really nice. It fits in well with things like hawthorn, wood betony, which we'll get to, rose. It just has one of those, you know, how do you describe it? The world is an anxious place. You're okay, but you want something to just mellow out you want something that just keeps you more in place. You want it to help keep your nervous system kind of in a constant restorative place. You're not looking for sedation. You're not looking for anything to really reduce your anxiety at the moment so much. You just want to stay at a steady, less anxious place. Lavender and many of the other herbs are helpful, which is another way of describing nervines. But it's very strong flavored. Whenever I use lavender, it's just a small part of the formula. I pretty much never give lavender alone, even the glycerite. And so if it's in a tea, it might be like 1/6 part of a tea. If it's in a tincture, it might be 1/4 or 1/5 part of the tincture. So in other words, I just use small amounts of lavender in formula. Um, like as far as safety, it's safe. It's strong tasting, but safe. But if you're using essential oils, don't use them internally until you have more knowledge about how to do that. And be very careful. There's a lot of terrible information about the safety of essential oils saying they're safe internally. Essential oils are nearly pharmaceutical products, which is useful in the sense that it's strong, but problematic in the sense that they can do damage at much smaller amounts than infusions, glycerites, and tinctures. Um, as far as what species to use, they're kind of used interchangeably, but I would find one that you like the flavor and smell of. Around here, the one I can grow in my garden is Lavendula angustifolia here in the Northeast, which I really do like the smell and flavor. But there's a lot of lavender species. As this photo shows, there's probably 10 species or variants of lavender in there. Next, this picture came out pretty good. This is uh, Tilia or a linden. And the parts used are two parts. And the photo shows them. So you see the flower, right? The flower is white with the white stamen sticking out. Follow the little green stalk of the flower back, and you see kind of like a spatulate, an oblong leaf shape. And that's called the bract. It's lighter green than the leaf that it's resting on. So that bract plus the flower, that's the part used for medicine. It's a leaf bract. It's a flower, excuse me, a flower bract. So there's a lot of names for linden, but one of them is lime flower. So if you go to a store and you see lime flowers sold, it's not the flowers of limes, which are nicely aromatic, the fruit lime, the green fruit. Lime flower is just another word for linden. As mentioned, the flower and the floral bract are the parts used. It's good as a tincture, glyceride, and infusion. It's pretty tasty. Linden is one of the tastier plants in this list. It doesn't have the UGG support next to it. And it's non-sedative. It's a nervine and anxiolytic. It fits into your classic nervine structure as so many other plants. There's just many ways you can use it. But one of the ways that I really like to use linden is as a nerve restorative, as a gentle, non-sedating nerve restorative after hard times. So, you just you're going to school and you're doing all these tests and you finally came out of it. And now you're kind of at this constant elevated level. You just want something gentle, non-sedative to help bring your nervous system back to place. I realize, by the way, a lot of these things are very similar. Um, they are. I mean, they just have slightly different effects in people's bodies. But linden is just one of the sweetest teas to drink by itself after just wanting a nice, non-sedating, relaxing. So you're at work, you have a lot more work to go through. You want something that just like keeps you mellow throughout the day, but doesn't interfere with anything. I would go with linden tea. It's tasty. You can add a little bit of honey if you like, and just drink it throughout the day because it is very safe. So a nerve restorative after a hard time. It can be taken. It's not the best though at reducing very anxious times. So if you're really tense and really up in your head and having a hard time, I would try some of the stronger herbs. And then when you come down, in order to maintain that level, this is more of a linden moment. There are many linden cultivars. I can't tell them apart at all. There's a couple in front of our library here in Ithaca. And I don't know, there's one native linden tree in this region, and it's called basswood. In this region means all the way to Appalachia. And that's Tilia americana. And it doesn't really have a history of being used similarly. So I don't really know if you can use it. So I'm just saying, if you know your botany and you're thinking, well, basswood is a tilia. Can I use that? I'm saying, I don't really know. You can give it a try. It's not dangerous. I will tell you that has nothing to do with this, but the young basswood leaves are very tasty, very mucilaginous. So if you just want to eat a leaf in springtime and you know your basswoods, eat a basswood leaf. All right. Moving here. I hope this is working for people. Next, ooh, we get a little bit trickier now. So this is Lobelia inflata. I was so glad Gillian Stansberry, an herbalist naturopath that I have a lot of admiration for. She did a whole class in this plant. I was so glad because I use this plant for so many things and find it very interesting. We'll come to interesting in a minute. As far as using the plant for medicine, I use the whole above plant while it's in flower and fruit, which is what this photo is. So in this photo, you can see the light blue flowers and the inflated or the fruits that are kind of fatter towards the tops and ends of stems. Um, that's why it's called inflata, because the flutes look inflated, because the fruits look inflated. Um, so I would basically gather this plant and chop it up, as we'll get to in a minute. But that's what you're looking for. It's a native plant, but where I gather it is old logging areas where it grows in plentifully. So after the trees are taken out, I'm not saying that's good, but after the trees are taken out, if the soil is sandy, often lobelia will grow in abundance. And so I feel comfortable gathering it in these circumstances, being native. It has some weird names like pukeweed. We'll come to that in a minute. And Indian tobacco is kind of a weird name because Indian tobacco would just be tobacco. Anyway, it's called Indian tobacco. While we're talking about Native Americans, so I am not. So I'm saying this because my name, sometimes people think so, other reasons. I have lots of friends in the Seneca Nation. So I talk about Native American stuff sometimes, but I'm a second generation Russian Jew from the US. So just to be clear on that. We talked about how to use the medicine, the whole above ground plant in flower and fruit, and get rid of any of the woody stems. If the stems are very bendable, you can use them, but if they're woody, I would garble them off. The two main preparations I use for lobelia tincture, and it's one of the few plants that I use as a vinegar. Um, and the reason for that, it just has historical use. So basically, instead of infusing it in alcohol, I infuse it in vinegar. And this plant is kind of an odd nervine anxiolytic. So we're going to use a term here that's going to come up, and that's the parasympathetic nervous system. So you divide parts of the nervous system into sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest. The parasympathetic nervous system is most in play while you're sleeping. They're always against each other. There's always some sympathetic and some parasympathetic. It has to be in order to stay alive. But the reason I'm bringing up the parasympathetic nervous system is because that's what lobelia seems to work on. It seems to extend its effects on increasing parasympathetic tone, meaning it helps relax. So, but what it does best, it tends to enhance the effects of other relaxing plants. So you're giving somebody what plants we've covered? You're giving somebody some Damiana, some blue vervain, some hawthorn, and then you want to add something that kind of kicks up their level of either bioavailability, maybe, or the ability for those plants to work stronger. I might not be saying this as clear as I want. Lobelia enhances the quality of herbs that help relax people. And I'm not exactly sure why it does it via the parasympathetic nervous system. I'll describe a little bit more in a minute. But that is one of my favorite uses of this plant. There's lots of uses for lobelia, but I find that ever since I started adding it to other people's anti-anxiety formulas, I've gotten much better results. So I'm a big fan of it. We'll talk about safety in a minute. It's usually just a small part, like a fifth part of a Nervine formula. Next, so lobelia does have some things to consider. So it is called pukeweed, and in all the books it says it'll make people vomit. I've given lots of it. I've never seen anybody vomit, but I have two or three stories that I want to share quickly. So I had one former student that accidentally made tea out of it and then vomited right afterwards. That makes sense. Lobelia inflata is absolutely acrid. If you take a leaf and chew it, you will get that burning sensation in your body. The plant has acridity. So first I want to say is don't use it as tea or don't just chew the plant unless you know what you're doing. When I'm processing lobelia, so I gather a bunch of the plants and then I chop it up. If my face is over them and kind of the plant juice, whatever comes off, gets on my face. It burns. Doesn't feel very good. I have to wash my hands afterwards. So if you're processing the plant, there's some constituent of it. I'm not sure which constituent it is. That, like for instance, if I rub my eye while processing the plant, my eye will definitely burn. So be a little bit cautious processing it. Um, I have met one or two people that say they vomited from the tincture. But I've been lots of it, and I've never seen it. I believe every story I've heard, that those three stories. So it seems possible. Here's summing it up. Lots of sources say don't use this plant. It's very strong, can cause vomiting and other problems. That is not my experience. That is not most of my fellow herbalists' experience. I want this plant to be more widely used if people feel comfortable with it. And I feel like these are exaggerated adverse claims to it. Again, processing it, rubbing your eyes will definitely cause some pain. If I put it in a blender and my face is over the blender while it blends, that kind of fumey stuff definitely can irritate my skin. So there's clearly something in it that's acrid and burning. But in the amounts given as tincture or vinegar, I don't see that effect. I hope all this is making sense. I want to make lobelia more useful to people or used because it's so beneficial. Again, a lot of it has to do with it has slight relaxing properties on its own, but it really just increases the efficiency of other relaxing formulas, which makes it very useful. Um, I would avoid lobelia in pregnancy unless you're working with an experienced herbalist, birth worker, midwife, or whatever. There are times when people use it, but I would suggest never using it in pregnancy unless you're working with somebody with a lot of skill and experience. Avoid it there. So to point out, my voice is going to that higher range that happens after a while. The reason I have so much experience with lobelia has to do with asthma. Lobelia is a bronchodilator. And so I'm not going to spend much time because it's a class about anxiety, even though helping people breathe better does reduce anxiety. But I want to say that the way I've used lobelia a lot by itself is for people having asthma that's not too severe to help them breathe again. Basically, it's a bronchodilator. And I've written about it elsewhere. So I'm saying this because I've given it a lot and I've not seen this puking or other negative effects in the amounts given, which is usually the amounts given is usually like 5 to 10 drops at a time by itself. 5 to 10 drops. I don't think it's in here by itself or in formula. Um, but it does have a relaxing effect. If somebody has an asthma attack, and then the lobelia by itself helps bronchodilate, breathe better. It does have a calming effect. So I hope that's helpful. That is lobelia inflata. There's quite a few lobelias. The only species I use is inflata. Next is mimosa with these gorgeous stamens, pink stamens. That's also an inflorescence, many, many, many flowers chunked together. So mimosa is also called silk tree. It has a lot of names. And I call it often by the genus Albizia. There are two parts that are used for the plant, which is the inflorescence, the flowers that we saw, and the bark. All my experiences with the bark, I don't live near uh, mimosa, so I haven't played much with the flowers. Um, Someday, I mean, it's kind of a rampant weed in parts of the United States, but not up here. You can see the different ways that preparations for it, tincture, tea, glyceride, and capsule. And lobelia, and albizia or mimosa is a nervine anxiolytic. In other words, non-sedative. One of the things about albizia, mimosa, that is different than some of the other plants here is that it's both helpful for anxiety and depression. That's actually not that unusual. Many plants, because anxiety and depression feed into each other, share similar chemistry. I think, I don't know. It looks that way. Anxiety and depression could be more on track, often share similar symptoms. And I would say that mimosa is helpful for both anxiety and depression. Um, it's an herb that's a little bit stronger, but a little bit stronger. What does that mean? It can be taken on a regular basis. Let me try again. Mimosa can be taken as needed. It's not that strong, but you can also just try it. So in other words, you're anxious, it's not severely anxious, and you just want something to help bring your anxiety down. You can drink some tea of the bark, which is a decoction, or a tincture of it. So it's maybe mildly sedative or mildly relaxing would be better. I've never really seen it sedate anybody, but I have seen it help relax people by itself. Also, it's commonly used in formula. The one contraindication for mimosa, and it's an important one, is not to use it for anybody with bipolar disorder because it looks like for sensitive individuals, it could put them into a more manic state. So, bipolar, you know, there's a lot to bipolar. Mania means a more heightened state. So if somebody has bipolar tendencies, I would just avoid this plant entirely. Also, there are some studies that cause uterine contractions, so avoid it in pregnancy. So avoid it in bipolar, in mania, and pregnancy. Aside from that, it's very safe. Um, and in parts like in Appalachia, I see in South Carolina, it's actually it's very weedy. You see it a lot along the roads. So if you live in these areas, certainly gather it. It can be difficult to gather the flowers. The trees get pretty big, so you need a ladder to gather the flowers. But I have to say, like, since it's a non-native tree that can grow in profusion, I'll just cut down the tree and then take the bark off the tree. That's how I gather it. Because really, in places I've been to, like in Virginia, people, just trying to get it out of their fence rows. So I help. So mimosa is a gentle nervine, mild, mid-gentle nervine tonic. And I just use it a lot. I just think mimosa has a just quieting effect as a nervine, can be used for long periods of time. Hopefully some of you are still with me, but I'm still here, still drinking the tea. Hmm. All right. So the next plant is motherwort. This is a photo of motherwort. This would be a good time to gather it. I would take this perennial, I would take the whole thing to the ground, non-native, perennial, and then I would strip off the leaves and the flower tops. I want to point out that the calyxes, the flowers are held in this harder structure. This is so weird looking. Here's a flower, here's the calyx holding it in. And as the plant ages, the calyx gets sharp. You will know this if you've ever worked on motherwort, that if you gather it later in the season, it's very stingy. I don't know if it actually cut your hand up, but it's really sharp and painful. So no damage really done here. But if you're gathering motherwort and it's later in the season, these sharp calyxes are just going to be pointy and sticky into you. The parts used are the leaf and flowers. So far, the medicines I've made are tea and tincture. It's very bitter. A lot of people um, cannot feel like they can't drink motherwort tincture because motherwort tea because of the bitterness. And I would put it clearly again into the Nervine anxiolytic category. And it has a lot of helpful things, but let's talk about probably one of its most healthful aspects to it. And that is it's really good for anxiety associated with PMS or kind of hormonal fluctuations. This is a place where it really shines a lot. But in general, motherwort, like blue vervain, um, is really good for overthinking. This is one of those that if you just have those intrusive thoughts, motherwort can be really helpful. Like hawthorn, it has pretty well figured out. It has really useful cardioprotective properties to it. So once again, we have a plant that if you're working with people that can use a cardiac tonic, they've had a heart attack or these are very serious things that need to be treated medically. But you also want to, so you're trying to give some herbs that also help with the medications or whatever else is necessary. Motherwort is really helpful. I'm not really sure. Like with hawthorn, it's clear that the antioxidant properties really help. With motherwort, it's less clear what chemistry is involved there. So, with people with history of heart disease, and people with history of heart disease and anxiety, motherwort is a really good one, often along with hawthorn. So, but it's also just good for general agitation. And some people find it useful as needed. Like for some people, it's just sitting there and just shaking up and just worried you want something to bring it down a couple of inches. Motherwort can be helpful by itself. It's also used in formula. Again, though, it's very strong tasting. So for PMS, anxiety, agitation with PMS, also with menopause, um, it's helpful. And another one, it's helpful for heart palpitations associated with anxiety. So if you have heart races where you're anxious, one, get a medical checkup, make sure that your heart is in good shape. Our hearts, 50% of people, whatever number, die from heart disease in the US. So have that baseline, get your medical checkups. But again, if it's nothing serious, um, but your heart feels like it's racing, you have heart palpitations when you get anxious, motherwort is the way to go. You can take a fair amount of it, like 2 to 3 dropperfuls is needed for anxiety that's happening right now with heart palpitations or anxiety associated with PMS. So it has a few places, though, you want to avoid it with. First, avoid it with anybody who has hypothyroidal, anybody with Graves' disease. Excuse me, that's wrong. Anybody with Hashimoto's, forget Graves' disease, that's hyper. Anybody with Hashimoto's thyroiditis or hypothyroid, which is extremely common, should avoid motherwort. It looks like it can bring the thyroid hormones down a little bit, or at least affect them in a negative way. So if you're hypothyroid from whatever condition, avoid motherwort. Also avoid it in pregnancy because of potential effects on the uterus. It's unclear, but from my reading about it, it seems like a good place to avoid. Otherwise, it seems pretty safe. It's just strong flavored. Um, and it's pretty easy to grow. Like it's really easy to grow, as in it can be weedy in places. But it's a pretty plant. It has those beautiful green leaves with the deep veins in it. So we got motherwort, really helpful for general agitation, over worry mind going into loops, um, cardioprotective properties in case somebody's had heart disease and has anxiety, and also for PMS, anxiety associated with PMS. It's a little more specific, excuse me, of a plant. Next, we go more down the gentle herbs. So now we have oats. This is the parts of oats that people like to use. These are the milky tops of the oats. If you would squeeze one of those, a little bit of white carbohydrate would come out of it. Really satisfying. It's like popping a pimple when you do that. Fortunately, it's not pus that comes out of there because we do not tincture pus. I don't tincture pus. It has a couple of names. There's wild oats, oat straw, or oat tops. Part of this depends on what part of the plant you're growing uh, and gathering. So, wild oats is just a general name, even though, frankly, it's rarely wild. Oats is almost always cultivated. The straw of it is the culm, which is a kind of a part. Um, it's the part that holds the flower top up. It's called the culm. Basically, it's a grass. And with it, you have this kind of harder section coming up with the flowers, later the fruits up here, and then a leaf coming off the side. The leaf doesn't tend to be used that much, but this part, which is called a culm that holds the flower and fruit, is often used, and that's what's called oat straw. Uh, Tincture, glyceride, and tea are really useful here. And oats is one of the few that I'm just going to put clearly in the Nervine category. It is very safe. Like, is it a food or is it a medicine? Is up to you to decide. I would put it as a food medicine. Oats is just one of the better plants for helping long-term anxiety, and you just want something gentle to take every day. So it is one of the better post burnout. Hopefully, there's a pre burnout plant, but a post burnout. So all of us involved in whatever form of social activism you do, whatever you help community, your friends, your family. Often, what happens in the end, you find yourself like the director of this thing that you didn't expect to be, and now like you have all this responsibility over the course of time. You feel like you can't give up this position because you know all these things to be there, then you become a grouch, right? Grouchiness settles in eventually into this position, and you stay grouchy for a while until finally you get nudged out, which is way better for your health and usually the health of the organization. That's what oats is for. Oats is oats, drink it every day. I think the best way is really just drink the tea, and it can be the oat tops or the oat straw. And just, make a quart of it. This is a French press, in case you're wondering. Make a quart of the oat straw or oat tops in a French press and drink that quart a day. You'll be peeing out oat straw stuff, um, but it has a really nice restorative property to the oats. You can also just drink it because you like it. It's a very safe plant. Sometimes, so oats contain zero gluten, but they often cross-contaminated in the processing centers where you might get them from. So, like if you gather your own oats and you keep it separate from any gluten-containing food, it will not have gluten. So you will, if you have gluten allergies, you will not be allergic to it. But if you buy oats, there's always the possibility that there was some cross-contamination with gluten-containing foods, and that seems to be common. So be cautious if you're gluten intolerant uh, when buying oats. I imagine some companies are very clear about making sure that doesn't happen. You can be allergic to oats, of course, but that's not that common. But it's not gluten. I think that's it. Oats is a great restorative. After burnout, Michael Moore, one of my main teachers in the mid 90s, was really a fan of it, and I agree with him. So a restorative, very gentle tea. You can just drink it throughout the day. Really, anybody can drink oats and eat oats. I think it's one of the best photos I've ever taken. So a little bit of bragging right here. This is passion flower. By the way, the other purple flowers are ironweed on the side of it. But I mean, it's hard to take a bad picture of passion flower. It is, uh, it's sublime, gorgeous, over the top. I just want to describe the different parts, but I won't. So the passion flower, probably the leaves and the flower are the strongest, but you can also use the vine itself. If it's woody, don't use that. But any of the thinner vines, the non-woody vines, can be used. Tincture, glycerite, and tea all work well. And it's a nervine, anxiolytic, sedative. So it covers all the bases, and we'll get to that. I would say, I am saying, I guess, there are two herbs that I really like, two plants that I really like that help with excessive thinking and what I think of as brain heat. Like there's no relaxing, it's going on, it's going strong, and it's non-productive, right? It's not you're thinking of great things to do. You're stuck worrying about this or fretting about that. So, and often like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that, a lot of beating oneself up or intrusive thoughts. I think passion flower and blue vervain are the two premier plants for this. So I'm not talking about passion flower. I've already covered blue vervain. But really, if you have a lot of intrusive thoughts and you just want to shut your brain up a little bit, but non-sedative, we'll come to sedative in a minute, but non-sedative, passion flower is great. Usually you have to take it for a while, week, 2 weeks, who knows? But what you find is it just lessens over time. So you're drinking the tea or taking the tincture. It's a pretty strong tasting tea, by the way. It's like catnip, it's kind of a musky flavor. But over the course of time, you find like, oh, I'm thinking better. I'm more present is always a good way of knowing this. Your brain is not always in overthinking mode. Thinking is very good, but this kind of intrusive thought, these mental loops, they're not so good. They really just take away from day-to-day pleasure because you're stuck inside of you rather than being present anywhere else. It could be taken by itself, many people do, or it could be taken with other herbs. I often combine it with blue vervain and wood betony, which will be, I think, the last plant in this talk. Um, it's really very safe, and I've met just a few people though that have had a sedative effect. They got tired after taking it. So passion flower, I consider very safe, except for some people who have a sedative effect. I've only seen it twice, but twice is enough for me, considering one of them is somebody I work with real well. I work with regularly. So passion flower is just really take it regularly for a mind on fire, for intrusive thoughts, for circular thinking, for inability to relax because your brain won't shut up. Again, though, you can take it as needed, but taking it over time will be even more helpful. And I finally was able to grow some up here in the Northeast. Um, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's relaxing. It's kind of relaxing just looking at it. For me, it's relaxing, but also like, what are those little corona parts and what is their reason for being in the flower? So consider passion flower. Next is peach leaf, a plant that I'm just learning to use better and better, more and more. I would say that peach leaf and hawthorn share some of the similar qualities. They're related to each other, the rose family. So in peach leaf, it's the leaf. Uh, and then tincture, glyceride, or tea. The glyceride is delicious. Well, it's almondy flavored. So peach leaf glyceride, delish. It's another nervine anxiolytic. I would say it's on the mild side, often used well in combination with other plants. And it's another one that's just good for having frayed nerves. Like you've just had a rough time. Somebody broke up with you, you broke up with somebody, other people are breaking up, everything, the world is breaking up. This video is breaking up. Anyway, things have been rough. You want something that's gentle and relaxing and tastes good. Then peach leaf can just be done, especially the glycerite, or it could be combination with other herbs. Again, though, it's non-sedative, and it just, I don't know, it has, in my mind, I'm thinking it helps walking through life easier, something like that, just and enjoying what's around you when taking it, especially as a nervine tonic. Um, Peach leaf, like wild cherry, is dangerous for grazing animals, very dangerous. But that effect has never been seen in humans. So if you like look up peach leaf and you get all these danger, danger, danger messages, that's pretty much about animals grazing on wilted peach leaf because it has cyanogenic glycosides. This is stuff you can look up, but there's in human history that has not shown up. We don't graze on it. We take small amounts regularly. But if you're interested, you can look up a peach leaf. Make sure though you look up human uses for it. If you're going to make medicine, which is what I suggest, try to use fresh leaves or freshly dried leaves. It makes a better medicine, makes a stronger flavored medicine. And if you dry it, just make sure you keep it out of sunlight. You know, if you have peach trees, this is the leaf of the peach tree. So again, it's helpful for coming back after a rough time. Like a lot of other herbs, it's not like for passion flower, like really good for really racing minds. I don't find peach leaf like that so much. I find it for just the gentle day-to-day helping reduce anxiety without having any very strong effect. Peach leaf. Rose. This is a Rosa rugosa cultivar. Hmm, I can almost smell it. So rose is a couple of parts that are used for medicine. The flower, the bud of the flower and bud, which I really like, and the fruit, which is called a hip. I think for anxiety, the flower and bud are stronger than the fruit. I think the fruit has a lot of other uses. When I'm working with anxiety, I like flower and flower bud more. Lots of ways to prepare it: tincture, glycerite, tea, syrup. One thing I like to use rose glycerite I like to use rose glycerite. Uh, sorry, I'm probably going to say this statement 4 times. I see some people in the clinic who are very anxious and are not very good at taking a deep breath in order to reduce the anxiety. So what I like to do is to give them a bottle of rose glycerite and have them take a deep breath while taking the glycerite, like a half a dropper full 5 times a day. So you could do this with any of them, but rose glycerite just tastes good. So, there's an encouragement to take it. I think it has physiological effects, but I think that lots of people have positive associations with rose, not everybody. And so I think just taking rose glycerite a few times a day just helps. It's a placebo thing, right? So you're overthinking or whatever anxiety you're having, you stop and take the glycerite, and it just gives you a moment's pause in order to bring your nervous system level down a little bit. So as I wrote here, I think of rose as having a general brightening effect. And by brightening, I mean it just helps people feel a little better, help with focus a little bit, clarity a little bit. Maybe I should say it feels like it brings people a little bit more into their body, but not in a negative way. So I use rose a lot in the clinic because I feel like it has an anxiety reducing aspect to it. Plus, it tastes pretty good. So if I'm giving my normal horrible tasting tinctures to people, I could put like a fourth part rose glycerite in there and make it taste better. The syrup way is just a plant in sugar rather than in glycerin. So that will raise blood sugar, but it's delish. Rose petal syrup is very yummy. Rose is considered very safe. And since so many people like it, it has that, like with chamomile, rose is very well known. So when you give it, people are like, oh, I know that, which helps them. It helps with patient compliance, their desire to take it. So I think rose has a gentle, relaxing aspect to it. I think it's really good as a daily Nervine to help reduce anxiety in the long haul. I also think the can be taken for anxieties that's happening, though it's not as strong as some of the other plants. And again, I just really like giving the glycerite to people to have them take a bunch during the day, just to take a moment out and just take something that tastes good and be present for the moment. So that's rose. Next is skullcap. Uh, Skullcap, we're going to move more into the sedative properties again. And this, I would use this whole plant. So what you're seeing in front of you is skullcap and flower. This would be a perfect time to gather it. I would use the stems, the leaves, and the flowers. Skullcap could be a tincture, a tea, or a capsule. It's fairly stable, though I hardly ever give it in capsule form. I've heard that the tea, well, actually, I learned that the tea is not very useful. And then one day at the free clinic, I ran out of the tincture and I used the tea and found it effective. So since then, I'm back to thinking skullcap is an effective tea. I just want to, yeah, I'll come back to that at the very end. It's about the free clinic. Um, Skullcap covers all the bases, nervine, anxiolytic, and sedative. Here's one of the more interesting aspects about skullcap. It has muscle relaxing properties to it. So some of the other plants do, but skullcap has a little stronger. Often with anxiety, there's tension. And with tension, you hold it in your body and it's a feed forward mechanism. Your body is tense, so you feel more anxious. So your body tenses up and you feel even more anxious. So skullcap, kava, by the way, is muscle relaxing too. Back to kava for a minute, also muscle relaxing. Again, that whole thing about being careful about driving. So with skullcap, it helps with anxiety, helps on the mental health state of things, but also helps just the body relax a little bit, which can be very helpful for relaxing tension, anxiety. So in other words, if you're somebody who has a lot of anxiety in your body, consider using skullcap. It can be used by itself or in formula. And depending on the dosage, it could be mildly relaxing to somewhat sedating. In other words, making people a little bit sleepy or not quite present. I have found, excuse me a minute, I have found that skullcap, even more than very individual in people's reactions. So for some people, they can drink a lot of skullcap and have no at all, feel nothing. And other people, smaller amounts of skullcap um, might affect other people, smaller amounts of skullcap might make them sleepy. So in other words, skullcap, it's important to try with different people. So if somebody's sensitive, try a small amount, is really what I'm trying to say here. So skullcap for some people is somewhat sedative. Skullcap for other people, barely anything. So it's just trying it different ways for folks. I'm sorry, that's a lot of repetition. So the dosage is very variable. Um, it's a very safe herb. I've rarely seen any negative effects. Like passion flower, the only negative effect I've seen from skullcap is that for some people they'll take it and then feel tired and they didn't want to feel tired. So to re to go over skullcap again, one of the best herbs for anxiety associated with a tight body, holding anxiety in your body more, maybe a tight neck. Skullcap can be taken in smaller amounts on a regular basis, as a nervine, and it can be taken in larger amounts for a more sedating effect. One thing that skullcap can be very helpful for is for insomnia or having difficulty falling asleep, especially with a tight body. So you try to fall asleep, your mind's very active, but also it's just hard to relax your body. You can probably try much larger doses of skullcap if it doesn't have a negative effect on you. So taking it right before sleep. Skullcap is really helpful, really nice herb for this. We just have a few more left here. I'm hoping I don't go into full redundancy mode here. This is Tulsi. There's a number of related plants. This is the part that I would use, the whole plant, stem, leaf, and flower. Sometimes it's called sacred or holy basil. And then there's other kinds of simum, which is called Vana Tulsi. I mean, Tulsi is a kind of basil. Basil itself is relaxing. Tulsi is just a little more relaxing. There are a number of different kinds of ocimums, basils, that have this relaxing effect. Tulsi is just the one that's most commonly used. And then there's different cultivars of Tulsi, like Krishna or Rama. I don't really use them enough to know the distinction between them. Um, so you can try the different cultivars and see how they affect your body differently. Tulsi can be used as a tincture, glyceride, or tea. Not bad tasting, tastes like basil. And the glyceride, though, is very tasty. It's a nervine anxiolytic. In other words, not sedative. And now it's going to fit squarely into this whole group of plants that I think are just great nervines. Tulsi is just a great nerve restorative. So taken over the course of time, it's very safe. It blends very well with things like rose, wood betony. So it doesn't have like it's not so much specific for me. Like motherwort with heart stuff going on, blue vervain with a very overactive mind. Tulsi, I just think for general everyday anxiousness. In other words, let's put it in the water supply. No, let's not put anything in the water supply, but meaning many people would benefit from taking Tulsi regularly. There's also a lot of weird Tulsi products that have a lot of sugar in them. They're just different. I'm just talking about the teas, glycerides, and tinctures. I generally use it in formula with a lot of the other plants I've mentioned. I use it with Damiana. I might use it with blue vervain, hawthorn, rose. I don't really know where I wouldn't use it. I mean, I guess I wouldn't use Tulsi with a strong sedative herb since Tulsi does not have sedative properties and wouldn't really be helpful there. So Tulsi is just creme de la tea for plants that just have a general nerve anxiety reduction properties. I think this is getting worse and worse until I finally get to the last plant. So there's really very few people I wouldn't use Tulsi for, except if they didn't like the flavor. It shows up in lots of formulas for the background use of it. All right. Anything else about Tulsi? Yeah, it's just very safe, very well tolerated, and very well known as well. So these days, Tulsi has a positive reputation, which for somebody who works in a clinic makes it easier to give to people. They're more inclined to take it. Next is valerian. Those lovely plants. That's my garden. The valerian hasn't been growing as thick lately. Valerian is non-native and likes wetlands. My yard is very wet. Um, the parts used are the root. It could be used as tincture, glycerite, capsule, or tea. After a few years, you got to throw your capsules out. The capsules lose their potency within a few years. I rarely use it as tea as well. I mostly use it as tincture and glycerite because it captures the aromatics and keeps it fresher. Valerian also covers all three categories: Nervine, Anxiolytic, and Sedative. That's true with most sedatives, by the way. I've said this a bunch of times, but basically an herb that's sedative in very small amounts might be a Nervine or an Anxiolytic. So valerian kind of quiets the mind more strongly than a lot of the other plants. So we're now looking at a more sedative herb. So this is an herb that you might consider you can't fall asleep because your mind is overwired, you won't shut up, or your day-to-day activity is overwired and your mind won't shut up. Valerian can have a sedative effect. You're taking it through the day, and all of a sudden you feel a little bit less cognizant uh, during the day. In other words, valerian is stronger than many of the other plants that I've mentioned. The dosage really has to do with what your effect is. You can take valerian. If you took 5 drops of valerian 3 to 5 times a day, you would have a nervine effect. If you took valerian 15 to a little bit to a dropper full because you were anxious, it would have an anxiolytic effect. If you took 2 dropperfuls of valerian, it would have a stronger sedative effect. So it's really useful in all the categories. It's just depending on how what the effect that you're looking for, and the dosage will help with that. I really like valerian glycerite, by the way. I think it's really strong and it makes the flavor a little bit more palatable. So valerian and safety. So valerian is generally considered pretty safe, except this big caveat. Out of almost all the plants I use, valerian has the most common adverse effect, or what I would call a paradoxical effect. About 1 in 10 people, that's a lot of people, so in this class right here, a bunch of you will have this effect, and that is it will make you agitated. So for a reasonable proportion of people, meaning about 1 out of 10, 1 out of 12, when they take valerian, instead of relaxing them, it agitates them. It makes them more anxious and more difficult to sit still. Because of this, I would strongly suggest that the first time anybody tries valerian is in the middle of the day. So most people take valerian for sleep. That's the most common use of it. The problem is if you take it for sleep and you can't sleep, you'll be very agitated, laying awake at night, thinking terrible thoughts about your herbalist. So trying to avoid that, take the valerian in the middle of the day and maybe 10 drops. And if you are agitated, it's just you're in the middle of the day, you can just move your energy around and move through it. I mean, it's nothing very dangerous. It's just general body agitation, mental agitation. I've never seen it very severe where people have really terrible, dramatic, dark thoughts, just more unrelaxed. So the next thing about it is valerian may potentiate or make increase the strength of other mental health drugs, such as SSRIs. I haven't seen it, but I would be cautious. So if people are taking pharmaceuticals for their anxiety, I'd be cautious with valerian. It's just strong, is really what it is. Valerian also has a strong smell, which smells nothing like my socks, but many people compare it to socks. And some people just hate the smell and taste of valerian. So the glycerite might work, or you just try. We've covered, I think, 23 or 24 herbs right now. So there's lots of other herbs. But I have to say that valerian is probably the strongest of the herbs to help people sleep. Out of all the plants that people come back for regularly to help us sleep, valerian is the most common. So again, though, small amounts can be taken for just general nervousness, general anxiety throughout the day as well, especially if it's heightened, right? Now, some people like Tulsi, Damiana, Rose, they're just not strong enough. And then you're looking at valerian, in lower dosages throughout the day. Vervain. So this is close relative of blue vervain, but this is vervain. Sometimes it's called simpler's joy. The Barclay Levy had a book called Simpler's Joy, if you've seen that word before. And vervain is frankly very similar to blue vervain. I just happen to grow it. This picture, it grows in the flagstones in my yard. Um, and I put it in here because vervain has a very, very strong history for mental health and anxiety in more European medicine, more Western European medicine. It's just there. I just want to make sure it gets mentioned in here. But really, I would say it has very much the same qualities as blue vervain. It's really good for intrusive thoughts, overthinking. So I would only use this if you're gathering it. Somehow I feel like I just want to pay attention. I just like this plant and want to make sure it gets in here. Um, Again, there's been some studies with vervain, this plant, uh, and rats showing some fetal harm. So I would just avoid it in pregnancy. I want to say that again. So there have been some lab studies showing some problematic aspects of giving rats vervain and in pregnancy, and I would avoid it in humans unless you know what you're doing. And not all rat studies don't apply to humans. I mean, a lot to say about animal studies, but I want to say that often people say what affects rats will never affect us. That's not always true. So I just want people to be very cautious, especially during pregnancy here. So it's helpful for constant thinking and for over worry. Um, and it's just if you're listening to this and you don't live in the United States where blue vervain is native and you have vervain, I would just suggest using vervain for all the same things. The parts used are the above ground leaf, stem, and flower. Don't use the woody parts of the plant. Tincture and tea, and for all those things I said, intrusive thoughts, etc. Next is wild lettuce. I think we have three to go. I'm saying that to myself, I think. So wild lettuce, there's a couple of native and non-native species of wild lettuce. This is Lactuca biennis. This plant is about 6 foot 3 inches. It's pretty tall. It's a native plant. And so most of the plants could be used, the Lactuca species. So wild lettuce is a relative of regular lettuce. Have you ever noticed that when lettuce bolts, that they have this white latex? That's the medicinal part. So I've never used, you know, uh, garden grown lettuce for this, but historically, mostly I think in European history, they would actually juice lettuce to make a relaxing medicine from it. So we're doing this with the wild plants. So when you gather wild lettuce for medicine, you want to make sure it has a lot of latex. Tear a leaf off of it, and the latex will start to pour out of it. Be careful gathering it. Many of them are native. We don't want to endanger native populations. Um, the best way I think to use it is to tincture it in a manner that concentrates the latex. If you go to my website, I have a whole description with pictures on how to do this. I don't, it's a long description, but I've been working on years on how to kind of concentrate the wild lettuce to make a strong medicine. So I have a blog about it. If you type in if you just go online and just type in Seven Song Wild Lettuce, it will show up. For some reason, it's one of the most commonly assessed things for my website. So wild lettuce is a pain relieving anxiolytic plant. So generally, it just helps reduce some severe pains. I'm still, Frank, here's what I want to say also. I'm still learning the best uses for it, but some people do have a sedative effect from it. So if you have anxiety associated with pain, something hurts, wild lettuce would be worth a try. I would like to be more specific next year. Hopefully, I am as I learn this plant more. Um, but it's a pain relieving, mildly sedative plant. Um, and again, you have to make it strong. Like take wild lettuce plants and just chop them and tincture them. They're very weak, is what I'm trying to say. You want to get as much of that latex into your alcohol as possible, into your tincture. It's considered very safe. It's slightly sedative. It's related to garden lettuce. And I'm still using it. I like to use it in first aid where this happens. So if I'm doing street medicine or any kind of first aid where somebody comes in a lot of pain and also really anxious, wild lettuce is one of the main ones. Often fairly high dosages, like 1 to 2 dropperfuls after initially trying it with the person, with the preparation that I use. And I think this is our last plant. And then we have one or two more slides after this. This is the very lovely wood betony. Bethany officinalis. I love this. This is in my garden, and some of them came out white. They're the same species as the purple ones around them. I adore plants. So it's also called Bethany. There's a couple of plants called Bethany. This is this plant. And it's also called Stachys botanica. So I have it as Botanica officinalis, but older books and even some modern ones call it Botanica, Stachys botanica. The part used is the whole above ground part, the flower, the leaf, and the stem. I find them really easy to grow. And if I can find them easy to grow, almost everybody else can. I am not great at gardening plants. Uh, the way I make it currently is tincture and tea, but I did make a glycerite, which I haven't tried yet. So tincture and tea. And it's a really useful Nervine anxiolytic. Um, I have come to, in the past 5 or 6 years, I've come to rely on wood betony extensively for everyday anxiety. It's rarely sedative, so I just give it to lots of people who just anxiety is a part of their day-to-day existence. And of course, with other plants that we mentioned. I think maybe like a little bit stronger than rose or tulsi, maybe a tiny bit less strong than Damiana. It's hard to do it. But I just find that drinking or taking wood betony with many of these other plants on a regular basis helps people reduce their daily anxiety load. It's not known to have any adverse effects. It's safe. It's pretty easy to grow and very pretty. Pretty easy to grow and very pretty. And I really suggest getting to know it. All around, non-sedative, anxiolytic. It's a little bit strong flavored. It's not as bitter as something like motherwort or hops, but also not as easy as something like avena, oats, or tulsi. So that is it for today. If you've stayed in this long, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Um, this is absolutely free. If you ever want to donate, so I work the Ithaca Free Clinic. That's what this photo is. I've been working there. We're now in our 20th year. I'm one of the founders. It's an integrative free clinic. And I see people telehealth, meaning if you're still here and listening to this, you can set up a free consultation. All the medicines at the free clinic are free. I'm sorry, all the herbal medicines at the free clinic are free, though we don't send medicines. That's an important caveat. So if you live in Ithaca or around here, you can come see me. Consultations are free, medicines are free. And I've been doing this a long time, partly to see how well herbal medicine works. And you can find the donation button. Again, you absolutely don't have to, but there's a donation button on my website, sevensong.com. It'll be pretty obvious. If you want to donate, the money will go to helping people at the free clinic. Or really, I do a lot of free work, so it's just there. Woo! So, all right, just a little over 2 hours. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I really hope this is helpful. I know that anxiety enfolds and makes so many people's lives very complicated. I'm hoping that the information from today will give you some ideas and some preparations and herbs to take for the anxiety. And with that, I'm going to read some of these things. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving a hoot about your own health and other people's health. And hopefully we can all make a difference in this world. That's what I really hope. And reduce other people's anxiety as well as our own. All right, everybody. Thank you so, so much for being here.